Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over the 4-game NBA slate for tonight on DraftKings. Usually not a big fan of these small 4-game slates or like 3-game slates, but the Wizards are on the slate, so that does present a pretty good fantasy game because, you know, they play at such a fast pace, they don't play a lot of defense, so these games are usually pretty good for fantasy purposes, so I am looking forward to this slate. And before we continue, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, really helps me out, really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets I build every single night for the NBA season, projections, values, my cheat sheets, my defense versus position chart, and also my Discord chat, links to all in the description below for my Patreon. And I think that's about it. So I say we get right into the video. And my voice, it's still a little rough right now. It's getting better, but might have to clear my throat a couple of times. But Trae Young, he comes in as the most expensive guy in the slate, and to be honest, I have no interest in playing Trae Young tonight. I just feel like there's better players that could potentially score more that are about 1,000 cheaper. So I'm going to pass on Trae Young tonight. I don't think he's going to be high owned either. It's a bad matchup versus Miami. So I really don't see the need to go to Trae Young tonight. So I'd rather play Joel Embiid here at 9,500. So it's a small slate, so we usually want to jam in the guys that, you know, have the potential to score the most points, that are also going to be at higher ownership. And Joel Embiid, he would fall in that category, because if you're missing, on a small game slate like this, if you're going to miss out on a guy that's going to be high owned and scores the most points, you're more than likely going to be dead, especially in cash games. Might be able to get away with it in GPP. Well, maybe actually the opposite should be said. But either way, you want the guy that has the potential to score the most points, a high ownership, and a decent price. And that is what Joel Embiid is tonight. Anytime he's in this 9K range, I always have interest. Whenever he's 10K plus, I hesitate a little bit. But whenever he's in like 9,700, I always have interest because the guy's capable of having huge games. He's got 31% usage rate and a 1.5 points per minute, which is actually the highest point per minute rate on the entire slate. Now, it's not a good matchup versus Denver. I will say that. They play slow and are a good defensive team, as is Philadelphia. But Embiid is averaging about 45 fantasy points per game versus Jokic, which isn't elite, but there's always upside for more with a guy like Joel Embiid. I don't remember if they actually played them more recently, which they have not. But I do think Embiid can get you about 50 fantasy points tonight, and you will take that at 9,500. I think he's one of the safer plays, and he is projected to have some pretty high ownership as of right now. So I do like Joel Embiid. I think he's a solid start to your cash games. It shouldn't be really too difficult to fit him in. Bradley Beal at 9,300. Always got to have some interest in Bradley Beal, especially with all the injuries. This game has the highest over-under in the slate. No surprise with the Washington Wizards game. It's at 230 over-under. So obviously we're going to want some exposure to this game. Now, Beal has not been great the past 3 games. They played some pretty tough defensive teams. He had 29 fantasy points versus the Clippers, 43 versus Miami, 44 versus Philly, which isn't terrible, but we want something more like 50 plus. You know, he had 57.5 versus Orlando, 48.75, not too bad either. And he had a really nice stretch. It's not on the game log because it was more than 10 games ago, but he had a recent stretch where not recent stretch, but like a 4-game stretch where he was like in the 50s and 60s consistently. So that's the kind of upside Bradley Beal has on any given night. And versus Charlotte, last time he played Charlotte, he had 42 minutes, 57 fantasy points, dropped 30 real life points. And I think Bradley Beal can do it again, and I think he's right up there with Joel Embiid as the top spend up of the slate. And this is a much easier matchup than the matchups he's had 3 games in a row. Charlotte's giving up the 5th most points per game or just in general, fantasy points given up, and they suck versus big men, but when it comes to guards, they're about average or below average versus, you know, guards, point guards, and shooting guards. And he's playing huge minutes, especially with all the injuries. He's going to be the main ball carrier, or ball handler here and scorer, and I think this game does pop off, so it would make sense to like Beal here a lot. He's been about 1.25 points per minute, 31% usage rate, and over 36 minutes per game. I mean, he'll play 40 minutes if he needs to. Wizards play fast and no defense, and these games always turn into great fantasy games, so definitely like Bradley Beal here. Do think this game has the best potential for fantasy points on tonight's slate. Jimmy Butler, you got to like Jimmy Butler. He has been red hot. I mean, the past 4 games have been downright amazing. He's been playing absolutely monster minutes as well. 62 points versus Toronto. 55 versus Boston, 68 versus Washington, 43 versus Chicago. That helped with overtime a little bit, but still, he has been fantastic. He's playing absolutely monster minutes, and I will say the price has come up about 2,000, but he's just been so good. I do think he's worth the price tag here. And I do love the matchup versus Atlanta. They rank 3rd worst defensively and are 25th versus shooting guards and 30th versus small forwards. It's also a pace-up spot, as Atlanta is 9th in pace-up play, so I always like getting guys in pace-up spots. I think Miami's about 16th, so it's not like a huge difference in pace, but always nice to get a guy in a pace-up spot. On the year, he's been about 1.3 points per minute with a 25% usage rate, which has actually been boosted the past few games because of, Dragic's out and Winslow's been out. So, yeah, it has to take on more of a load. And I like Jimmy Butler quite a bit. I mean, if you don't want to play Embiid, I wouldn't mind going with the Butler and Bradley Beal route, but I definitely think all three of these guys are the top spend-ups on today's slate. So, definitely like Jimmy Buckets, Bradley Beal, and Joel Embiid. Devonte Graham, he's a GPP play only for me, especially at this price tag. The guy's got upside, but I have a hard time paying $8,400 for this guy. But he's popped off before. I mean, 63 points versus Golden State. I mean, 47 versus Brooklyn. He's not a bad player whatsoever. I mean, he's got 40-plus point upside every single game. Scored 42 points versus Washington last time out, but he was also 6,900. This is the second most expensive he's been all season. So just have a hard time paying this much for Devonte Graham, but he is in play for GPPs just because of game environment. Bam Adebayo is listed as questionable, but they just said recently, I believe, like 15 minutes ago, that he is going to play in this game. So I definitely have some interest in Bam here. He's been amazing the past two games in good matchups, and that will continue here versus Atlanta. I mean, two of the best matchups you can ask for, Washington and Chicago, played about 38, 39 minutes average right there this past two games. Had 52 points in each one, double-double, 20-point double-doubles in back-to-back games. He pretty much does a little bit of everything in the stat sheet. Blocks, steals, assists, rebounds. So definitely I like Bam here. He's been over a point per minute on the season, and I'm not saying he's going to get 50-plus points again. He's definitely got the upside, but I do think he's a safe bet for over 40 points, and I think he eats in this matchup, so definitely like Bam Adebayo here. Should definitely be on your radar now that he is good to go. Hassan Whiteside, I'd rather just play Bam, to be honest, but Whiteside's always fine. Rui Hachimura, 6,500. Just getting exposure to this game. I mean, he's been pretty good, and he's playing huge minutes. I mean, 38 minutes, 43, 39, 37. There's just so many injuries. He's just being pushed into big minutes, and this is a great matchup down low versus Charlotte. They're 26 versus power forwards, 29th versus centers. He's been about 0.86 points per minute on the year, so I think Rui's a safe bet for 30 points in this matchup. So wouldn't mind exposure to Rui, but I do like his teammate a little bit better, which we'll talk about. Julius Randle at 6,400. I think he's a really good mid-range play, and he just seems a little bit too cheap for this matchup versus Portland. The past two games were blowouts before the good game versus Indianapolis versus Denver, Milwaukee. He only had 25 and 21 minutes. They got blown out in those games, but last game he got up to 35 minutes again in a close game. Scored 38 fantasy points. That's kind of what I expect tonight. It's a really good matchup as well. Portland is 26 versus centers and is the sixth worst defensive team this season. I have Randle for about 32 minutes tonight with the upside of more, and he's been a little over a point per minute this season. So I think he grades out as a tremendous mid-range play. Would not surprise me if he hit 40 points at 6,400, and we will take that all day. So I do like Julius Randle quite a bit as a nice mid-range play on this slate. Bertans if he gets hot from three, but to be honest, 6,300 is a little bit expensive. But the guy's been great. I mean, since the Clippers game on December 1st, 35, 35, 31, 41, 36. He's blazing 3, 6 for 12, 5 for 13, 7 for 13, 4 for 12. You're going to get 10-plus three-pointers here, and if he's hitting the shots, I think he's a pretty good GPP play. Last time versus Charlotte, he had 28 minutes for 6-11 from deep, ended up with 41 fantasy points. So he's more of a GPP play, but I do think he's a safe play for cash. I mean, he's been fine. It's just 6,300 is a little bit for a guy that's three-point dependent, but he's been a very good three-point shooter this season. I like the game environment, so Bertans would be on my radar. Not like a core play for me by any means, though. Jabari Parker, screw Jabari Parker. He screws me every single game. Mo Wagner here at 6K. I actually have a lot of interest here. Now, he killed me last game. He only played 17 minutes, which I thought was pretty odd. I mean, games before that he had 26 minutes, 31, then he only plays 18, and I mean, he wasn't doing terrible. 7 points, 6 rebounds, and 18 minutes for 15 fantasy points. It wasn't terrible. He was 2 for 2 from deep, so I don't understand why he only played 18 minutes, but I think the minutes are gonna be back up there, and this is a great matchup for Wagner here. Charlotte's awful down low. They're 26th versus power forwards, 29th versus center, so it really doesn't get much better than this. He's been elite on a point per minute basis this season. Elite for his price tag, I should say. 1.17 points per minute with a 21% usage rate this season. Pretty solid, and I do have him close to 30 minutes tonight, so a 30-plus point outing would not surprise me, although I guess the minutes aren't totally secure, so hopefully he's just having a good game defensively and keep up offensively, and gets on the court. Hopefully he doesn't get taken off again for only 18 minutes, because if he does, obviously that's going to be a terrible play at 6K. But I am banking on him getting his usual minutes, close to 30. So I do have some interest in Mo Wagner here. So definitely someone to keep on your radar. He is grading out as a tremendous point per dollar option as of right now. Tyler Herro at 5,900. He had a ceiling game last time versus Chicago, and I mean, we thought it was a ceiling game versus Washington with 38 points, but he followed it right back up versus Chicago with 42 points. He was on fire in overtime. The guy could not miss a three, 5 for 11 from deep, and just was blazing away in the overtime in the fourth quarter. So yes, I do have interest here, especially with no Justice Winslow and Goran Dragic. The minutes are more secure. Played 32 minutes versus Washington, then overtime, but 41 minutes versus Chicago, but he was going to get 30-plus minutes regardless. So definitely have some interest in Herro here. It's a great matchup versus Atlanta. They play fast. They suck on defense, especially versus the guard position. So Herro is on my radar. If you don't want to play all the way up for Jimmy Butler, I can understand just wanting to drop down a little bit for Herro, who doesn't have the same upside, but he's got, I think the floor is pretty safe, especially with all the injuries. PJ Washington, he is just kind of like a lineup filler. He's listed as probable. I mean, had a great game versus Atlanta last game where he had 41 points, then 28, 23. The minutes are pretty secure, but it's just, he's not like a core play for me, but if he ends up fitting your lineup, say you have 5,900 left, I wouldn't mind just getting exposure to this game with PJ Washington. It's not the worst play in the world. Mitchell Robinson, maybe just a GPP pivot off of Julius Randle chalk. I mean, he's been pretty good the past 3 games. 31 points, 33 points, 33 points. Pretty good on a point-per-minute basis. So just someone to keep your eye out on. So don't mind Mitchell Robinson, just more so in GPPs. RJ Barrett, again, he's pretty cheap. It's a good matchup versus Portland, so I wouldn't hate going to him. Kendrick Nunn, 5,400. Again, if you don't want to play all the way for Jimmy Butler, you could just play the 2 cheaper guards here, and he's been solid. Playing big minutes, 30 minutes, 42 minutes, 25 points in each game. Just no Winslow or Dragic just opens up some more minutes for these guys in usage. So Kendrick Nunn definitely on my radar. I think he's a pretty solid play tonight. I expect them to have some ownership as well. Ish Smith, he's been very good since being a starter. Price is coming up a little bit. Although the last game I believe he was 5K, so it didn't come up too much from the last game. But it's not the worst play in the world. Charlotte's a pretty good matchup. They're pretty much average to below average versus guards. He's been very good, seeing 30-plus minutes per night. So don't mind Ish Smith. Kind of more of a lineup filler. I wouldn't say he's a core play, but I do think he's a solid play versus Charlotte. Miles Bridges, I do have interest here at 5,100. So last time he played Washington, 35 minutes and 47 fantasy points. Pretty much his best game of the year. And I believe so he's pretty much a hit or miss guy. I mean, 47, 27, 17, 29, 34, 28, 18, 18, 12, 30. Kind of hit or miss here, but I love the matchup for him. I love the game environment. I think this is one of those games where you could have 30-plus points. 5,100, not a bad lineup filler whatsoever. I do think he's a pretty safe play on tonight's slate. You can play Kent Bazemore. The minutes have been up. He played 36 minutes last game, 21 fantasy points, 3 for 6 from deep. Now, he was also 3,800, so at 5K, it's pushing it a little bit. I actually would rather play Kelly Olynyk here, a little bit cheaper of a price tag. So he comes in at 4,100. I actually think he's a pretty good play tonight. So Miami is dealing with some injuries here, and I do expect him to get around 25 minutes tonight. And I will say he absolutely sucked the last game where he had 7 fantasy points and then 13 points versus Washington. And these were 2 really good matchups, but I am willing to give him another chance here. It's also another really good matchup. He's been about 0.86 points per minute this year, which isn't awful. But this is a good matchup versus Atlanta. They play fast, they lack defense, and if Miami can get a lead here, maybe Olynyk sees some extra runs. So don't mind Kelly Olynyk, and I think this is about, as of right now, I think this is going to be the cheapest I will go. I know Alfred Payton had a really good game last time out, but the minutes they're not really totally going to be there, so we'll see. Maybe if the minutes ramp up a little bit, but 31 points in 17 minutes was pretty impressive in a close game, so I guess he's someone you could keep your eye on. But as of right now, as low as I want to go right now is Kelly Olynyk, but always some injuries open up some value later in the day. Deion Waiters is questionable, so we'll just see how the slate shakes down, because last time I thought everything was set. Then Lonzo Ball gets ruled as a bench player, which obviously he still played, but hurt that he wasn't starting. And then the Pelicans had some 3K guys starting in the lineup, like Okafor and Kendrick Williams. So again, just keep your eyes out for news later in the day. I'll have all the updates on my sheet and in my Discord chat. And I wish you guys the best of luck. Remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video.